now on YouTube. Oh, okay. Right. Yes. All right. Hopefully this is working. Bear with me, everybody, but I'm trying something new here, which is I'm trying to go on to, oh yeah, this looks like it's working. Am I on? Okay. Sorry. I got to do this at the beginning of every time where like just this sad boomer who's not sure if he's on or not. So this time I'm trying to talk to you guys on YouTube, which looks like it's working, but also I'm trying to talk to you on Instagram, and that's a new thing for me. So bear with me if this is a little bit wonky. Okay, so welcome to Professor Asma's Guide to Unusual Knowledge, our live stream. I think this is our 5th one of these. And every time we do it, it's super fun. As usual, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. And then I'll be able to see, oh, I can see there's several people on Instagram. I can wave. I'm getting really high tech here. Fantastic. Okay. So please put questions in the chat, and then I'll try to answer them as they come along. And it could be any topic: science, politics, history, philosophy. I will pretend to know something about it, and I will regale you with masterful speculations and very low empirical data and reliability. But I don't let facts and information slow me down. So, okay. One thing I thought we'd start out by doing is just talking a little bit about the show last week, which was for us kind of a viral hit. Now, I know there's virality of sort of the youthful variety, which is like thousands and millions. But for us, it was a big deal. We had almost 2,000 people watch this crazy little video we did last week on synchronicity. And, those of us putting this together, which is just, brother and son, are trying to figure out like what works on YouTube, and everything we can sort of manipulate, the title, the subject matter. We don't know how to game the algorithm. And so we don't even try. We just try to make a show that we're enjoying and having fun with. But every once in a while, something goes viral. And one thing we wanted to ask you guys who are fans of the show and who tune in, like, what do you think draws people in? We're trying to do an interesting job with the thumbnails to make the images really clear. And the topics we're trying to make interesting, but they're just, I didn't think synchronicity was going to hit so hard, especially when we've done things on like demon vampire princesses from history, and those got a lot less views. Part of me doesn't really care. We're just going to do it anyway. But if you have any views on this, please throw down and give us your insights. We're trying to do a mix of sort of science-based stuff and also history and philosophy. I'm looking at the chat in YouTube, but now I'm seeing there's more things happening on Instagram. This is definitely above my skill level to try to keep track of all this. Okay, so someone asking on Instagram, the name of the channel is Professor Asma's Guide to Unusual Knowledge. And so every week we have some sort of video essay about strange science or philosophy. It's quite a bit of philosophy, cultural theory, psychology. We've been doing stuff on dreams lately and a series on emotions as well. So please tune in over at YouTube, and I'll try to see if I can figure it out here on Instagram more as well. All right. Please put any questions that you have in the chat. And in the meantime, also any insights about what draws you to YouTube shows. Like, is it more science stuff? Is it more philosophy? Here's a question. Do you think there could be, Tim R is asking, do you think there could be a supernatural component to dreaming? And do you find it odd that people think talking about dreaming is boring when it's almost like living in a different reality? That's a great question. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, a lot of times people, it's funny, like somebody will be telling you their dream and it feels very boring. I'm convinced that's not because the dream is boring. I'm convinced that's because people are not good storytellers, myself included. But, people oftentimes just don't know how to tell the story of their dreams, because I think intrinsically dreams are fascinating, filled with imagery. I just had a dream the other night involving, well, I can't even relate this dream. It was so X-rated. But it stayed on my mind for days. And I'm not like a pervert. I more philosophically interesting dreams, but this was something. And what's amazing is how you wake up completely taken in by the emotional sort of texture of the dream. So if it's a nightmare, you can be sweating, you can feel like you were running from a monster. If it was an erotic dream, well, there are physiological implications. But I do think dreams are extremely important. I'm not sure that they have a supernatural component. I wouldn't rule that out. I try to stay as open-minded as I can on this kind of stuff. But I do think what dreams do is unlock parts of the subconscious or the unconscious that you probably need to look at and to think about and to bring into the conscious mind. And so if you're sort of repressing that stuff or burying it or hiding it, then it comes knocking in the dream and wants to be attended to. And, you know, I'm not like a hardcore Freudian or even a Jungian, although I like various features of their philosophy and their psychology. I actually think there's things about us that are important in our mind. Let's say it's something at work, part of your social life. Maybe it's romance. You're trying to basically get some romance off the ground, whatever it is, or you're trying to get something going in your career. There's a lot of stuff that's just buried in this hard to express realm, which is the body records things and the memory, you know, is embodied. And oftentimes the dream is trying to activate it. And then you make, you know, if you take a dream journal or you do paintings or drawings based on your dreams, you get this very bizarre stuff. It's not always a wish fulfillment fantasy like Freud thought it was. Sometimes it's just hard to express. This is the best thing you can do to express the thing. And that's why I think art is such a powerful force. I was just watching this documentary of Hayao Miyazaki, who does the anime, you know, The Boy and the Heron, Totoro, Spirited Away. And he was working on The Boy and the Heron, and he said he was trying to lift his brain lid so that things would pour out, but he had to be careful not to lift the brain lid too high so that, you know, he wouldn't be able to handle what was coming out. And also he didn't want to give away too much about his inner dreams and hopes. And so some of the characters in his movies, his anime, are actual reflections of people from his life, like his teacher who he loved, but had a very fraught relationship with, another animator who he respected, and he always wanted their kind of approval, but he couldn't get it. So some of this stuff you don't want to show your hand, but art is a way to code it and to sort of get it out of your system and have a catharsis about it. Okay. Supernatural component is harder for me, although again, I just think you need more physics to make that work, and I'm not ruling it out. Here's another question. Egan, Professor Asma, first of all, hello. I know you're a great blues player. Thank you very much, and have played with the best. Are there many stories of blues guitarists that have based their songs off the existential? That's a great question. Thanks. That's an awesome question. Yeah, there's a sense that blues music, there's a sort of, I think, a kind of arrogance about blues music in the traditional academy. Like, oh, this is folk music, so it's not going to be that sophisticated. That's sort of how it was viewed, I think, in the early days. And then Alan Lomax, great sort of anthropologist, ethnomusicologist, started to sort of go down and take field recordings sort of from the Deep South, you know, and sort of followed the Great Migration north from, you know, Louisiana, Mississippi up into Chicago. And people began to sort of realize like how deep blues music really is and how deep blues music can go. There's a pretty great book by a guy named Spencer. I want to say John Spencer. It came out maybe a decade or two ago, called The Blues and Evil. And he does this analysis of blues lyrics, and he looks at how does evil, you know, Robert Johnson has a deal in the Crossroads and had a deal with the devil. And there's all this references to a hellhound is on my trail. And so he looks at images of evil and he says, look, these are not just satanic images, which is what mainstream culture thinks. he says in blues music, you have basically the roots of African religion. So you have the animism from like West Africa and parts of Africa where slaves were brought from, and they brought their religious and spiritual traditions with them. And so there you don't have the traditional kind of monotheism of like there's one God and he's perfectly good and everything. In African religions, you have oftentimes what's called the trickster God. And the trickster God is sort of like somebody who's very mischievous. They're playing tricks on everybody. They're mostly good, but sometimes they do very mischievous things. They can hurt people, but they're not all bad. And this is sort of an idea that gets worked out in blues music, and it's sort of a new form of it in the 20th century. And so you'll see like tricksters appearing in blues music. There is a great, to your question though about existentialism, there's a great blues singer. I want to say it's Blind Willie McTell. I could be off on that, but he does a song about that's very theological about God doesn't ever change and all this stuff. As for straight up existential stuff, this is harder to find. Although I think Skip James records a song back in the 30s or 40s called I'd Rather Be the Devil than to be involved in a romance with you, basically is what he's saying to his girlfriend, that that's just how bad it is to be in a romantic relationship with his girlfriend. So they're playing with this stuff, but I think in blues music, there's a lot of humor. And so just like the existentialists will talk about the absurd, where Sisyphus is rolling the giant boulder up a mountain. And when the boulder, this is the story Camus tells, and the boulder rolls back down again. This is actually an ancient Greek myth, but Camus makes use of it for existentialism. When this giant rock rolls back down again and Sisyphus has to start over again, he looks at what's happened and he just has to laugh. And then he has to start all over again. There is something like that in blues music where there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of the blues, there's a lot of suffering, but also there's tremendous humor. And the humor is sort of laced throughout the misery as a way to kind of, I think, help the listener and the artist get through it all. So, and I think, gospel music played this role in African-American culture too. It just blues is a different version of it. One quick story that B.B. King tells is he said that when he was starting out, he would play on the streets like of Memphis. He's just got his guitar and a hat, a hat on the ground for tips. And when he played a gospel tune, the people would stand around, and then the churchgoers would say, come around and sort of pat him on the head and say, that was wonderful. You're really destined for heaven. That's great. And then they would walk away and not put any money in his hat. But if he played a blues tune, people would say, all right. And they would throw money in his hat. So he was like, that was how he sort of converted his musical style more towards blues music, because in a way, blues is about this world, and gospel, whatever else it's definitely about the next world. So I thought that was kind of funny. Okay, some other good questions here emerging. Let's see. Do you have any good stories about playing in Buddy Guy's house band? Yeah, that's too many stories, and many of them I cannot relate here because they're just not fit for public consumption. There's just a lot of drinking and carousing and some drug use, never by me, but others. And so, it was a great, wonderful time. This was in the 1990s. And I was playing in the house band there with my friends, Howard and the White Boys. That band is a great band. They still play, and I play with them sometimes. Look them up, please. They're a great, great group. We toured with Buddy Guy during those days. I guess the one funny story about Bo Diddley is we knew he was coming to play, and we were going to back him up. We were his band. And so we thought, okay, he's going to come early that night to the gig before it opens, and he's going to rehearse us. He's going to tell us what tunes he wants to play, and we're going to basically be able to know what's going on in the set. And so the show's supposed to start at 9. It's a full house. The place is packed. There's no Bo Diddley yet. And we're freaking out. The club owners are freaking out. Everybody's sweating. We're like on stage wondering what's going to happen. And then like literally at like 9:05, the door swings open, and basically Bo Diddley storms into the place with his guitar, and he walks on stage, and he basically just nods at us, and the place is going wild. And he just plugs in. It's the loudest guitar amp I've ever heard. Plus, he had that square guitar some of you have seen. It's like totally modded out, like really amped up guitar. On comes this just a wall of sound and into the Bo Diddley beat. And we were just like, okay, like we have no idea what the songs are going to be, what the key is, but you have to just try to follow him. So you try to find out what's the tonic, what key it's in, and then you're along for the ride. And he really enjoyed it because we were able to track him okay. But that was super stressful. And I remember after we played the first song, he turned to us and he said, okay, how did he put it? He said, this cat is tied. Now let's skin it. And we were just like, okay, Bo, whatever that means, let's skin the cat. And so there's lots of stories like that where you just have these really big, fun personalities. And they're not even musicians. They're icons. They know they're icons, and they're just very eccentric. And so that's part of the ride, is going along and trying to track these guys. Hold on, I need a quick sip off the old. I am drinking cognac, but I'm not fancy. This is cognac from Costco. So this is a mix of the very high and the very low. It comes in a bottle that's like the size of a gasoline tank. And it's not bad. Good enough for me. All right, let's see. We've got some other fun questions here. This is good. Thank you guys, as always, for showing up and for posing questions. Okay, Kamei digs the paintings. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, these are some of my paintings back here. I try to do art every day. One thing we're talking about, by the way, is I've done some designs that are sort of based on esoteric themes, and we're thinking about making those into T-shirts, like silk screening them. And my sister-in-law and my niece are sort of masterful at silk screening, and so we might make some T-shirts that are available to, I don't know, to anybody who wants them, or maybe we'll make those freebies, like we'll throw those in if you subscribe over at Patreon, which would be kind of fun. Okay, so let's see here. What sort of comedy makes you laugh most? TV show, comedian, film, etc. Oh, that's a good question. God. Oh, geez. I'm a huge fan of Woody Allen, at least his older films. I think he's hilarious. I know there's other kinds of problems raised about his character, but setting all that aside, I think he's a genius of comedy. But I like some lowbrow shit. Like my son and I are fans of the Three Stooges, the Marx Brothers, and honestly, like my TikTok feed and Instagram feed Instagram is mostly artists, but TikTok is mostly funny stuff. So the obvious fails. I don't like it to see people really get hurt, but short of that, I find that really hilarious. And I'm just very lowbrow about comedy because I think my day job is so intellectual. Like I'm just reading books and writing books and teaching the students. So when I want something funny, I want something really kind of in the gutter, so to speak. So I'm not proud of it, but there it is. Okay, I love our Chicago blues. Okay, Ms. Egan is a Chicagoan, very good. I always listen to Tom Marker's Blues Breakers on XRT. Yeah, I grew up on Tom Marker's Blues Breakers too. And then I had the good fortune to meet him many times because when we played at Buddy Guy's, Tom Marker would oftentimes be the MC. He would introduce the artists. And so some of the people in our band, my good friend, old friend, Dan Bellini, became, I think, pretty good friends with Tom Marker. And he's always on the blues scene and still is. Great talent and great supporter of the blues. I know you and Paul had that terrific podcast, Chinwag. Thank you very much. Do you guys have any plans to start it back up? It's funny. We were just, Paul and I still do the Chinwag, but it's just not for the public. So he and I just did a Chinwag. It was like, I don't know, 2 hours long, where we're just talking to each other. And because we're good friends, we have the same sort of interests. And we did have this idea of we've done, I think, 2 shows for Professor Asma's a guide to unusual knowledge. So if you look back through our videos here on this channel, you'll see 2 shows that Paul is in. And we're talking about doing a 3rd one coming up that maybe on, are people interested in like these, like these libertarian authors like Ayn Rand or the science fiction writer Robert Heinlein? I'm not really a fan of their writing. I don't think Paul is either, but what a fascinating movement that was, you know? So we might have a show where we talk about authors we like and libertarianism and maybe the situation nowadays in science fiction. So Paul enjoys PAG Talk, Professor Asma's Guide to Unusual Knowledge, and he watches the show, and he's probably going to drop in every now and then. We are talking just at the very beginning of having conversations about maybe one day doing some live shows, but it's all very provisional. We really enjoyed doing the live shows with Chinwag because we'd basically go out and I would play guitar. If anybody saw a live show, you definitely wouldn't forget it. I'm playing guitar, Paul is playing the theremin, and then basically we have a talk about a topic. We both researched. We have like these little note cards, but we're totally improvising and just cracking each other up. And then we open it up for questions, and that's super fun. Like a lot of people have crazy questions and interests from that Chinwag audience. We definitely had lovable weirdos, and I count myself and Paul among you. And so we might do something like that again, maybe something live. Okay. Was I surprised to see Buddy Guy in Sinners? Oh, I was totally surprised and really enjoyed that cameo because I really enjoyed Sinners. And we did a show. If you go back maybe a month or 2, we actually did an episode. I have to remember to try to look into the camera. We did an episode on Sinners and blues culture. So if you go back, actually play some guitar, show you what some of the styles are, and then talk a little bit about my time playing in the blues world. But when we went to see the film and Buddy Guy shows up as really the elder statesman, who's really the main character, I'm not giving anything away here, but it was awesome. It was great. And he sings and plays great in the movie. And that whole movie is it's a love letter to blues culture. And they took the time to get things right. They were very careful about, getting the details right about the culture and the history of the Great Migration north to Chicago, and it's got vampires in it. I mean, what's not to like? Okay, let's see here, Stooges. Wag on weirdos. All right, we have some old timers from the Chinwag, and we are wagging on always. Okay, let's see. This would be a good episode. Okay, non-blues question. If intelligent extraterrestrial life exists, would we expect their evolutionary pathway to mirror Darwinian natural selection as we know it? Oh, great. Or entirely different evolutionary? That's a great question. Yeah, okay, good. So this is I guess there's going to be this movie coming out. I think it's called the Hail Mary Project or Project Hail Mary, which is a great novel that I think some of you have read. I loved that novel. It's by the same guy who wrote The Martian, which is that Matt Damon movie. And I think this new movie has Ryan somebody in it. I don't know. You guys will know who I'm talking about. And it looks great. The novel was great. And it sort of considers this question about evolution. What would happen? What would the trajectory of another life form be like in a very different environment? And of course, it creates a very different kind of anatomy and physiology. Like, what if you evolve in a situation where the gravity on the planet is radically different, where it's a very low gravity, and the whatever sort of evolves might actually be floating more like a cloud or something that's basically in a kind of atmospheric noosphere around the planet. I mean, there's all kinds of things. What if most of the life that evolved was deep underground? But would the rules of evolution be the same? And I think the answer to that is yes, with a kind of modification. Natural selection, as far as we can tell, is the way that evolution works predominantly, which means there's genetic variation of some kind, and then some things fit better with their environment and some things fit worse, and those get eliminated before they can sort of propagate. There is some evidence that off of some interstellar objects and some comets and so forth, that they have been able to find parts of the protein, the sort of, amino acids like aspartic acid and this kind of stuff embedded in rocks from outer space. They've been able to sort of land on, these little crafts on there, scrape this stuff up, bring it back to Earth. And when they examine it, they find something not like an Earth protein, but very close, like proteinoid matter, just a couple of amino acids away. And so that's one of these things that suggests that the building blocks of life are going to be spread out through the universe. And once you've got a replicating system like DNA, and maybe there would be a slightly different molecule structure for replication, but all you need is something that replicates itself, then natural selection can get going. Some people have even applied natural selection to the cosmos itself to say that solar systems are sort of like the genetic variations that, basically develop, and then whatever the environment doesn't allow them to survive, and they collapse in on themselves, or they dissipate, or they run into something else and basically are destroyed. So natural selection probably applies to anything that reproduces. Then there's all kinds of other stuff. Would creatures end up looking like they'd have 2 arms and 2 legs and 2 eyes? I doubt it very much. That stuff would be totally different, I think, given the environment. So that's a great question and super fun for thinking about really just think about it this way. Like, they just found a dinosaur in Morocco. This was last week. And this dinosaur is really big, and it has these giant spikes coming off of its neck, all around its neck and on its back. And we've seen something like this, like in the Stegosaurus. You've seen like it has these fins and it has these blades. But this basically is something we've never seen before. It has like these giant sticks coming off of it. And so some forms have lived on this planet, especially during the Cambrian explosion, that are long gone. And they don't look anything like the life that we've seen fossils for, or anything over the last, hundreds of millions of years. Okay, great question. All right, let's see. That episode you did on the blues was great, and that's how I knew you saw the movie. Okay, good. I'm glad you saw it. Thanks for watching. We really enjoyed that one too. Okay, here's a question, or here's a comment. People are wagging on. Good. I think some of you missed the chin wag. Fair enough. I think Paul misses the chin wag too, as do I. But you never know when that stuff could come back again, As we edge closer to retirement, it's always good to think about what we would do after. Like, I'm writing a book right now, which is taking a lot of time, and Paul is acting. I think what's the British mannered British, and the Downton Abbey movie is coming out soon, which he's in. Okay, who do we got here? Do you have a favorite noir film? Oh, that's a great question. God. Yeah, I love noir in general, and I read a lot of the stuff that Raymond Chandler stuff, the Dashiell Hammett stuff. I read all that stuff that it's based on. I do watch some really obvious ones. I watch The Maltese Falcon, and I watch The Big Sleep every year, for sure. But there's some more obscure stuff. What's the one with Robert Powell? Not William Powell, but Robert Powell. William Powell is in a lot of the Thin Man movies, but Robert Powell is in this great, I think it's a Dashiell Hammett film, where this doctor keeps him imprisoned in this Hollywood home, whacked out on drugs, and he escapes whacking some guy with a sap or something. It's a great film. I highly recommend it. If anybody knows that one, please tell me the name of that one. There's also a great noir film that not a lot of people know called Crossfire. And it's great. And it's got heavy themes about racism, anti-Semitism is sort of built into the storyline in a very intelligent way. It's kind of amazing that it got made. It's really fascinating. So I highly recommend Crossfire if you get a chance to see it. All right. Good. This is great. You guys are throwing all kinds of questions at me. I appreciate it. Who would you like as a guest on your channel or the chinwag. I'd love for you to talk with Brian May from Queen. Wow, that's great. I love Brian May. Big fan of Queen, of course, but also as a guitar player. I really appreciate Brian May because he's so unlike the other sort of quote unquote guitar heroes. There's just kind of this, Clapton, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, all of whom I love, Hendrix. But there's something about Brian May that really is thinking more about the song than the sort of guitar parts. And you can hear it and maybe it's because he had a really, very strong sort of counterbalance in Freddie Mercury, who made sure that the song, was the focal point. But then there's places in all these songs where Brian May really burns. He really shreds. I don't know much about him personally. Is he interested in like the esoteric or the paranormal? We all know Jimmy Page is interested in the esoteric since he bought Aleister Crowley's house at Loch Ness. And we know that half the lyrics in Led Zeppelin are not even veiled references to wizards and warlocks and shit like that. So, but I don't know about Brian May. So let me know in the comments if you know anything more about his personality. But he would be great. I mean, if the chinwag was going, we were on the verge of getting Geddy Lee on the chinwag. He'd sent us his book. We were getting ready, but then the show sort of fell apart for all kinds of reasons, which which have really more to do with business than the will to do the show. But that would have been a real get, in my opinion, is Geddy Lee. And I'm not giving up hope on that. We may maybe have that in our future sometime. So, okay, good. Paul Watkins says, I always loved Woody Allen too. Love and Death and Stardust Memories are two of my favorite. Yeah, Stardust Memories is such a great movie. But I struggle to watch his stuff anymore. Same with Louis C.K. How to deal with separating art and the artist. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I think in the case of Louis C.K., he like uncontroversially did the thing he was accused of doing and admitted to it. In the Woody Allen case, it's still unclear from a legal point of view. People feel very convinced about the possibility that he may have been allegedly, sort of perverse in his, and I don't want to get into it, but people know the story. This question is raised about all kinds of people. Like, what do we do with Michael Jackson, whose music many of us love, and yet there's this kind of creepy aspect to his own sexual tastes and involvement with kids, allegedly. Same thing with people like P. Diddy. Is that what we're calling him now? I really don't care. But I think this question about do we separate the artist from the artwork? A lot of people do not, especially more and more nowadays. I think it's very much the case that people, if the artist does something that's morally reprehensible, people will refuse to buy the work or pay for the music. Some people, I was talking to my students about this, and some of them sort of split the difference. They'll say, well, I love, Michael Jackson songs too much to give it up altogether, but I won't pay for any of it. Which I thought was okay. I guess this is a way that people, cut the baby in half to make a kind of King Solomon reference here. But this has been a problem always. Like, what do you do with Wagner? Many people love his music, but he seems to have been a rabid anti-Semite. Even people like Mozart, who people love, it looks like, if any of the stuff from Amadeus can be trusted, he was kind of an asshole. And so there's morally reprehensible stuff. And then there's just artists who are jerks. What do you do with that kind of thing? Do you turn the other way? Do you say that it has nothing to do with the artwork? Or do you say, okay, the person is the artwork and vice versa? It's really interesting. I tend to separate them. I tend to treat them as two different things. I think if you got rid of all of the morally reprehensible artists, there'd be nobody left, or there'd be very few people left for us to actually, whose artwork for us to engage. I mean, the person who did really try to do this was Plato. In the Republic, Plato says, one of the things you have to do if you're going to have a good society that's a just society, I got to remember to look at the camera, is you have to get rid of artists that have the wrong views about the gods. So if you're saying that the gods are petty and they're jealous, or they lie, or they're vengeful, then you are basically saying impious things about the gods, and you have to go. So really, Plato thought that most mythology has to be jettisoned from the ideal city, which means, like, all of Homer, essentially. And it's unclear whether he's serious about that, but people have tried to purify their artwork and turn it into something that's only noble. And you end up just getting, like, no disrespect to Philip Sousa, but you get marches and patriotic shit mostly. You don't get this kind of darker artwork because you're trying to keep everything sort of cleaned up. Okay, good. Let's see here. So I'm still watching Woody Allen and Louis C.K. and maybe occasionally hating myself. Okay, yeah, Geddy Lee would have been great. I'm really sad that didn't happen. And I think, one of the great things about Geddy Lee, and we just watched this wonderful documentary about Rush. I think it came out recently because I just saw it on an airplane, and they were just showing the evolution of Rush and how they, when I was like in high school, they were very popular, but it was still art rock. It was still math rock. It was still primarily guys, primarily boys, and young men that were into it. But there's nothing like their combination of incredible musical skill and mastery. Like, you can't play that shit unless you can really play your instrument. So that was one of the things that really drew people towards them. And I think then you got this intellectual component with, Neil Peart's lyrics. And so that led another level. So it was sort of like, it was nerd rock. And the nerds like myself, loved it. But the people of my generation were really more interested in listening to Kiss and the Bay City Rollers and crap like that. So Rush, I always have sort of a place in my heart for Rush. Come on, Xanadu, fantastic. But it's pretentious as hell. Like, and it's, you have to enter into it in a way knowing that there's going to be a lot of pretension. But then that's true of Yes and King Crimson and all that stuff. I can take it up to a point, and then I have to go listen to a blues tune to cleanse the palate, as it were. Okay, Bay City Rollers rule. Okay. All right, I don't think so. Okay, Tim says, oh man, that would have been awesome if you got Geddy Lee. I was thinking about Rush when you brought up Ayn Rand earlier. Neil Peart was really into her books and referenced them in his lyrics. Yeah, it's true. I think that the message that many people are bothered by in Ayn Rand's books is the sort of unbridled capitalism. And many people associate that with the excesses of capitalism. On the other hand, Ayn Rand had this vision of the individual as a kind of existential hero, which is a kind of positive image. And I think that's the stuff that Neil Peart and Rush were really drawn to, was this idea that you make your own destiny. There's lots of forces in life that are telling you that you're a victim, or telling you're just the subject of these larger, social factors or systemic forces. But the Ayn Rand, let's draw a line from the Ayn Rand philosophy up to the Rush philosophy, if you will. Indulge me. That whole vision is about individual agency. And I think that's a good message. If that's your only message, then you run into the problem that you're not taking into account the challenges of vulnerability from bad luck, poverty. And it's interesting, I don't know much about Neil Peart, but you may know that I think his wife and maybe his daughter were killed. Somebody in the comments can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe his wife and daughter died in an accident, and then he got cancer. So one thing that you see, here's my point, is in Ayn Rand and the sort of romantic individualist philosophy, there's sort of a picture of the individual that's independent of everyone else. And that's the sort of classic romantic hero. And but life is actually much more complicated. We're tied to other people in a way that makes us very vulnerable. And it's only a matter of losing your loved ones to make you realize you're not in control of everything. You can control how you respond to some things, but you don't make your destiny entirely. Life also happens to you, and bad luck also happens to you. And so I think that's one of the things that I don't know what he ended up like later in life. I know he took some big trip around the country in sort of on his motorcycle to try to process the stuff that happened to him. And so that's an element. I think this is an interesting subject too, because it comes up a little bit even in earlier writers. Like a lot of people are fans of Dickens, Charles Dickens. You know the story of the Christmas Carol and stuff. And Dickens, one group reads Dickens like he's indicting the capitalist society because you've got industrial London oppressing the worker. They sort of take a Marxist reading of Dickens. But if you actually read Dickens, he's not a Marxist. He thinks there's bad people in the world. And so the problem is not systemic failure, but just bad people, like let's say Scrooge or some of the other characters in his novels. And so this is a really interesting feature that you'll find even working its way out in modern rock and roll. You see it in a thoughtful lyricist. And so that's one of the reasons why I think Rush holds up really well. All right, good. What else you guys got for me? We've got a little more time. We want to meditate on the Bay City Rollers. Come on. Let me hit the cognac. All right. If you're new to this thing, make your way over to the YouTube page, because that's where people can interact more. And as I say, I'm always sort of learning how to process all this. I'm new to the technology. All right. So here's a question. What's your plans for future episodes? Okay, good question. One thing I'm planning on doing is continuing to do episodes about the emotions. I think we've done one on rage or anger, and we did something on fear. But I think I'm going to line up episodes on each of the emotions. There's a huge, fascinating debate that's happening in the literature between the kind of natural kind theorists who think that emotions are part of these genetically engraved brain systems that we sort of inherited from our mammal ancestors, and then a kind of social constructionist theory of the emotions, where it's basically something that you learn, and it's a kind of, there's a interesting philosopher of the emotions named Lisa Feldman Barrett, who's writing on this a lot now. You can look at her work. I don't agree with her, but she's very popular. If you want to see an alternative, I'm sort of more of a Darwinian about the emotions, and you want to look at work by Dr. Jaak Panksepp or Antonio Damasio, these people. This is a really interesting debate. For example, when you're afraid of something, it's the same sort of brain chemistry and sort of neurochemistry and brain processing areas that a mouse has or a rat has when it's afraid. It's the same system. But then there are these sort of learned psychological layers on top of that sort of biological fear. And then there are these cultural layers on top of that. So it's like a 3-layered cake. So human beings are afraid of the dark. Rats are afraid of the light. It's the same fear system, but it's coded to these different stimuli. And then human beings have like culture. So we have like Stephen King, and we can be afraid of people with chainsaws and in cars, stuff that didn't have time to evolve, and yet we've basically incorporated it and recruited it into this fear system. So I'd like to do more on the emotions. We did a survey over at the Patreon, and people voted for me to do an episode on the interstellar object that's just come into the solar system, and it's heading our way. Don't worry, it's not going to hit us, but there's some question about what it is. And we had the good fortune to interview the Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb, and Avi Loeb has, he's reviled by some but loved by others. Loeb gets sort of parodied in the popular press for believing that aliens are, coming into the galaxy. But that's not his view. He's just saying, why don't we at least consider the possibility that alien life might be producing some objects that are coming into our solar system, and then try to investigate them. It's not a dumb idea. It's totally reasonable. Some stuff entered our atmosphere and actually went through, our atmosphere and got down into the ocean. And he sent an expedition to try to collect this material to see what it was. And as far as I can tell, this is just good science. But because it involves possible aliens, he oftentimes gets lampooned or parodied in the press. But I think it's worth looking at. So I'm going to do an episode about that coming up. Let's see, what else do we got here? I don't know how familiar you are with Michael Moorcock's work, but his eternal champion concept could be good material. I don't know his work, but that's great. I will take a note of that and look it up. I'm always looking for suggestions. I really appreciate ideas coming from you guys. And so please keep those suggestions coming. I read all those comments and try to respond if I can, if there's time. And I get all kinds of new directions for things to research. So it's super fun. Keep them coming. I'll look up Michael Moorcock. Would you consider, Robin says, would you consider writing a book on blues music as philosophy? That's a great idea. I have considered that. I have started it once or twice. And I've written a number of articles about it over the years. Like I've published maybe 3 or 4 pieces in magazines about my experience with blues and blues culture. And so I do think that there is a larger book, that could be sort of drawn out. And I'm surprised people haven't done this. Like there's that book by John Michael Spencer, I think his name, on blues and evil, but there's very little philosophical analysis of blues. And yet it really should be a great, people should be mining that topic for philosophical stuff and just to understand the depth of blues culture. So it's a great topic. I'm working on book 11 now. So maybe book 12, Robin, I'll do a book on blues music as a philosophy. It's a great idea. Okay, here's another question. If emotions are driven by neurochemistry, to what extent are our feelings truly ours, and where does free will fit into that picture? Great question. Some people have suggested that there is no free will. And the more you connect these kinds of experiences to, the brain, the further and further you get away from free will, because you're just talking about a kind of, electrochemical system, which is a physical system. There's some really famous books that have come out in the last few years. Sam Harris has written, claiming there's no free will. More recently, a great neuroscientist whose name I'm blanking on. I love his stuff. He's written a lot on testosterone. You probably know who I'm talking about. Has written a couple of books about how there's no free will. I'm not inclined to think this is right. My own suspicion is that these guys are applying a very mechanical view of physical science to the human mind. And I don't think they're really entitled to do that level of reductionism. Sapolsky, God, thank you. So desperately trying to remember Robert Sapolsky's name. And I'm a huge fan of his. I really love him. He's great. But he's really gotten it in his head that because there are physical precursors and conditions for your thoughts and your feelings, then your thoughts and your feelings are not really free. And I think this is just wrong. And it comes from denying the validity of your experience as a source of real knowledge, wisdom. And it's a scientism rather than a scientific perspective. It's an attempt to reduce everything down to just efficient causation. I get it. I understand why they're doing it. That's been very successful since the scientific revolution, but it is a very incomplete way to think about the mind and the human being. And so for those reasons, I think there's a lot more going on. However, I do think emotions are partly conditioned. And so your experiences will shape those emotions. And then your thoughts also have an ability to shape those emotions. But sometimes your emotions do break through all of that. And you can find yourself doing stuff that you really didn't want to do and that you don't understand, like where that came from. And those are the experiences that lead people to say, okay, well, then you don't have free will. There's even some interesting experiments. There's a very famous experiment called the Libet experiment, where they were looking at the brain. They hooked up the brain and they asked you to press a button when you thought about, I don't know, the color blue or whatever. As soon as you thought about moving your hand, they said, then press the button. And what they noticed was people actually, their brain seemed to suggest a hand movement some fraction of a second before they actually felt the impulse to press the button. And so the way it was interpreted was to mean that the brain is already solving this problem before you're consciously aware of it. Now, I don't know. I don't think you should throw away free will based on one or two or even three of these bizarre little experiments. But it's a great question. And sometimes the emotions just totally overwhelm you, and that suggests that you don't have that much control. Okay, other good questions here. Clockwork Elvis is up. What a great name. Clockwork Elvis. Welcome. My wife wants you to know she appreciates the thumbnail of this video. She's been singing the song of Dragon Cats for decades. Excellent. Very good. I'm very pleased to hear that. And then says, maybe free will is just fuzzy, not simply have or have not. Yeah, I like this idea too. Why on or off? Why not just levels of your sense of agency? And I think we could redefine, because, if free will is this thing where you do it and there's no antecedent causes to it, then that's not actually helping you get to what you want, which is free will agency. Because if free will has no causal antecedents that led up to it, then might as well just be a weird random miracle that just pops into your head. Like if you just think there's no sort of synaptic connections that led to you having pizza tonight, then having pizza tonight is sort of like, might as well be God appearing to Saul on the road and turning him into Paul during some weird sort of possession. What you need is something in between that, where you, whatever the I is, has some sense of collecting your options, looking at all your options. Is it going to be pizza? Is there going to be Subway? Are you going to make pasta? And then somehow choosing. And so it seems to me that without postulating like a little homunculus in your head, there's probably a way to do this. But if you play the game too hard in just terms of brain science, you don't know where to find this sense of agency. And so that's where I think the model just breaks down. But I do like your idea that it's really not a on or off switch, but rather a sort of a fuzzy reality. I think, honestly, this is true for a lot of stuff. There's a great William James, as some of you know, one of the great pragmatic philosophers of the late 19th and early 20th century. He thought that there's a certain realm of questions where you get to choose what you believe. And it's a small list of them. Maybe you can count them on one hand, but something like whether or not God exists is something you get to choose. Why do you get to choose that? Because the evidence is not clear either way. We don't have a lot of evidence that God exists, but we can't prove a negative either. Maybe your science is just not good enough to detect God. So basically, James says, when you have some pressing belief option and the evidence is not clear either way, you get to choose. And so he had this moment where he had a kind of breakdown depression, where he was just sort of like crying in a corner. And it was because he thought that he couldn't prove the existence of free will. And then he realized, you know what? I get to choose this, because there is no lockdown, absolutely certain proof one way or the other as to whether free will exists. There's good arguments on either side. And since it helps me to live better by believing in free will, I'm just going to choose. And he calls this the will to believe. Some people don't like it. They think it's cowardice. I think it's impressive. And I think that most people do this all the time. So I think it's an honest approach to life. And I guess that's my feeling about free will. And other things like the big questions: do you have a soul? Does God exist? These are not clear scientific questions, but they could be very momentous questions for you, as I tuck into some more Costco cognac. Bear with me. All right, we're winding down. Guys, thank you for coming. to this thing. I really enjoyed it, and we're going to do this, probably once a month. And the channel's doing great. I really appreciate you guys supporting us. We're having some nice viral moments, and then things, are kind of slow, and then they pick up again. But really, we're having a lot of fun, and I think we're getting better and better at making the show. So that's the important thing. All right, one last question. Anybody got one? Or shall we sign off? Let's see. Do I see anything else here? Oh, Robin, you saw Avi Loeb interviewed about the object in the news. Good. Excellent. Oh, here's a question about dragons and cats. Are they all of our early human predators rolled into one? Birds of prey, snakes, and big cats. Dang. Okay, I'll ask next time. No, that's okay. I'll just give a very quick sort of take on this, and then we'll knock off. But that's a great question. I do think that if you look at the things that culture produces as common monsters, like dragons or big cats, you will see extremely exaggerated, extrapolated versions of human predators from our prehistory. Universally, human beings are afraid of snakes and spiders, deep water or murky water, stuff with big teeth, certain kinds of birds. And if you look at the griffin, it's classic. The dragon, the big cats, werewolves, these are all modeled. Like a perfect example is we have werewolves if you're descended from, European cultures, because wolves were a real threat. But in India, they have were crocodiles. And in Native American traditions, there's a were-bear. So the idea is, you get bit by this bear and the full moon comes and you become a bear. It all depends on the actual predators from your local environment as to what the mythology ends up extrapolating on and developing. And that's super interesting. There's a lot more of this in my book on monsters. There's also a book coming out by a friend of mine, which I highly recommend. I've just happened to be reading it and it's close to hand, is check out Morbidly Curious by my buddy Colton Scrivener. And this is coming out any day now. And he looks at why are we drawn to totally frightening stuff? Like, why do we have this love-hate relationship with horror? So, avail yourself of that title too. And thanks everybody for stopping in and such great questions. And I'll see you guys next time. All right, take care. Ciao.